This podcast is a part of Straight Up Strange Productions. Discover more shows like this one at straightupstrange.com.
You are listening to the Oddball Aussie podcast with me, your host, Oz Oddball. During this episode, you may hear things that challenge your own beliefs, but please have an open mind and enjoy. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Aussie Oddball, and if you have any stories you want to share, send them to theoddballaussie@hotmail.com. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. My experiences with the Hatman, or what I believe is him, started when I was in high school, around 2015. I went to a Halloween party with some friends and we decided to go ghost hunting in my friend's guest house, where her brother passed away about a year before because my friend wanted to try and contact her brother. We didn't experience anything, but I did notice a tall shadow that followed us back to the party that no one else did. I've been what I call a sensitive my whole life. I can see, hear, and sense spirits or energy, and I think this is why I saw the shadow figure when no one else did. The shadow must have known that I could see it, because it followed me home. About a week after the party, I started to wake up in sleep paralysis. I couldn't move, and it felt like someone was sitting on my chest, choking me. When I would start to fight and look around the room, I could see a man standing in the corner of my room. He was tall, about 6 to 7 feet, but he had no features, like a shadow figure, but he was dressed in a suit with a short top hat. His outfit is best described as something an old mobster like Al Capone would wear. For months I was waking up in sleep paralysis with the same feelings, but every time the man would move closer and closer to my bed, till he finally just stood at the end of my bed watching me. It got to the point where I wasn't the only one who saw him. I had a friend sleep over who slept in the living room, refusing to sleep over ever again because she saw a man in a hat watching me sleep. Even my siblings had seen the man in my room at night. My whole family was afraid to go into my room till one day I noticed he couldn't get into my room anymore. As soon as it got dark, I could see him standing on a hill outside my bedroom, staring in, and I would just shut my curtains to ignore him. When I brought this up to my mum, she shared with me that she had banished him from entering the home or bothering me, and I could just ignore him now. I'm now 23 years old. I live hours away from where I did in high school, even moved multiple times, but I still, at times, see who I believe is the Hatman. Whenever I see him, he just stands outside my windows at night, especially my kitchen, and I just tell him to F off, because I refuse to give him power since I believe his only power over me back then was built off my fear and teen hormones. This was a story from Keely of the Misty Mysteries podcast, so definitely go and check out Misty Mysteries podcast, and thank you, Keely, for sending that through. So yes, tonight we're going to be talking about the Hatman. So a few of you would have heard of the Hatman. I've had some people who I've discussed this with, telling them I'm going to be doing a show, and they've said, "Oh, well, what's the Hatman?" I said, "Well, you better tune in." So we're going to cover the Hatman. We'll talk a bit about shadow people as well, and that's a whole realm. I'm researching in the background. I've always had an interest in shadow people and this mystery behind it, psychological, enigma, physical, whatever it turns out to be for the person. There's always something unexplained. So it's definitely something I take great interest in. Again, another one of those things that I'm yet to see of my for myself. I guess I've seen things move behind me, but I've just associated that with being tired, or you might see a shadow that you think moves, but it could be trick of the light. Yeah, that's how my brain works. But a lot of people experience this, so much so that the Hatman has become a worldwide enigma. This Hatman is seen from China to Europe to America, here in Australia. It crosses borders, it crosses cultures. It might be referred to different things, but the interesting thing is that, generally speaking, the description always fits the same. A tall figure, masculine looking, with a older clothing set on. So a suit type of thing and a hat. Sometimes a short hat. Some people report a Western sort of hat. But generally it's a 1930s, 1940s looking person. And it's quite an interesting story. So the Hatman is a being that people have not been able to figure out. So let's start with the shadow person. So the shadow person, also known as a shadow figure, black mass, is the perception of a patch of shadow is living, a humanoid figure. It's interpreted as the presence of a spirit or other entity that believes in paranormal follow. So, followers of paranormal sometimes believe in. So there's a lot of different perceptions of this and beliefs in this. Some people believe this is, they go straight to demon. That happens so often. People go straight to demon. There's no real proof of this. Then you've got a lot of people who will believe that a shadow person is just another type of ghost, just a spirit. Then some people believe it's an entity of some other kind. Possibly a tulpa. So for those of you who don't know, a tulpa is a manifested entity. So if enough people are believing in something, it may manifest, is the idea behind a tulpa. So a lot of people think that a lot of negative energy in a household, or a lot of belief or fear from someone. This is why a lot of people think hormones can have something to do with it. They believe a lot of that tension can cause and can create an entity out of nothing, essentially, or bring forth rather something from another reality. Yeah, not saying dimension or anything, like just another reality, something from another place. So we're definitely on the paranormal spectrum with this one. Very rarely does anyone ever talk about this being a blood and bones figure that can be harmed in any way. I've never read a story where someone's actually held the thing's hand or physically been able to grab onto it. It's always been a paranormal entity that is a shadow, essentially. Sometimes it has eyes. Sometimes people say it has red eyes, like glowing red eyes, which, again, there's no creatures that really have glowing red eyes. That's a bioluminescence that just doesn't exist in humanoids. So that's an interesting one. So this is where a lot of people will look at that and go, oh, well, this must be something that is paranormal or spiritual. So they rule out cryptids in that sense. So when do they sort of attach themselves to people? Well, we tend to see that shadow person tends to be attached to younger people. A lot of the time it's teenagers, children, and then sometimes just people who are just going through a really rough time. And if we were to believe that this is some sort of an entity, you could imagine it being something that survives off energy. And what greater energy than the hormones and the and everything being produced when you're afraid? You know, the way our body reacts, the adrenaline that kicks in. There's such a big release of things in the body, in the brain, the serotonin and everything else that goes through the body and the brain when you're afraid. So the idea would be that they want to drain you of energy. And it's really, really interesting because nowadays we talk about energy sappers. Like, we talk about people, like human beings that we know of, that they're energy vampires is what a lot of people call them. Now, this isn't a supernatural thing. This is a completely psychological thing. So the idea of an energy vampire is someone who, and you've probably all got one, a friend out there who just drains you every time you spend time with them. That you leave their house and you just feel like you need to go to bed. You need to curl up with a hot cup of coffee and just relax, or you got to get some energy back because they just drain you as soon as they walk through that door. And it's really interesting. So we're thinking about the same sort of thing, but in a supernatural way, in the sense that this is a thing that just drains you just from being in the room. So now we've got a psychological side to this. You know, is this something that we're manifesting in our minds? This is something that we've created to personify a fear that we have. A lot of psychologists suggests that a shadow person is the personification of the fear of being alone, or the fear of whatever you're going through at the time. And it's easier for our brains in REM sleep to personify something. So when we go through a sleep paralysis, for instance, it could be our brains just playing a trick on us, because it's easier for us to deal with an enemy we can see than to face the reality of what we're afraid of. In Keely's case, I genuinely believe that she's experiencing some sort of an entity. Listened to a lot of Keely's podcast, and there's nothing to suggest to me that she would send me an email with a lie in it. So I do believe in what Keely wrote there, and I've got a few more stories from the internet that we'll go through, and these stories are always the same. So I do think we're looking at 2 or 3 different types of things here. I think sleep paralysis doesn't automatically mean shadow person, demon, ghost, whatever. Sleep paralysis can be genuinely a natural thing that occurs to people, like sleepwalking. But what we're focusing on is the ones that have had a paranormal experience alongside of this. I've met plenty of people, spoken to plenty of people who have had sleep paralysis situations, but have never seen a ghost, never seen a Hatman, never seen a spirit, never seen a demon come into their room. You know, it's one of those things where I think if the entity does exist, then sometimes they merge together. The stories merge together. So, yeah, you could have a creaky old house, for instance, that is ready to fall apart, and the people start having these negative experiences because they regret buying the house. And so they talk themselves into, this place must be haunted, we've got to get out of here. And that justifies their not wanting to put the effort in to fix the house up. On the other hand, I genuinely believe there's haunted houses out there where terrifying things happen to people and that we can't explain it. So I think we've always got to keep those parallel to each other, but separated. We don't want to go, okay, all sleep paralysis is shadow people, and all shadow people lead to sleep paralysis. So the shadow persons come up in a lot of different beliefs. Native American elders talk about a lot of these beliefs. You've also got here in Australia, the Indigenous peoples of Australia, they talk about it quite a bit. You go around the world, they're everywhere. Not so much in the sense of the Hatman. The Hatman is a more modern take on things. It's very hard to find older stories say 1930s that match up with the Hatman. There's definitely a tall figure. You've got the grinning man, the smiling man, which could be right on par with that. So there's definitely something there. And you got to remember, we also had, when we talked about the Mothman episode, we had some figures that turned up in there that Cole, he turns up with all these things. Ingrid Cole. So when Cole is around, people tend to link him up with these shadow people. So there's a really interesting connective tissue there with shadow people in so many different events. I've read stories of shadow people being around when Bigfoot sightings have happened. I've read stories of shadow people being around when alien reports have happened, when UFO reports have happened, when people have seen ghosts. Obviously, shadow people go hand in hand with that. And then I've seen people refer to shadow people just on the side of the road when they're driving. And these are people who you can't see their face. Occasionally, people do see a type of face, but it's generally a very plain white face. You can't really make out the nose or the mouth, but you can make out that they don't have any eyeballs at all. So just black holes where their eyes were. Again, that relates to a lot of reports that come in about the Men in Black. A lot of people say the Men in Black have no eyeballs. Some people just say they're a normal FBI-looking agent in a suit. So, there's lots of different reports. I mean, we talk about the black-eyed children. Black-eyed children, I did a whole episode on that in the past. We talked about pale entities, these different religions and beliefs around the world that talk about these pale beings like skinwalkers and everything. Again, connected to shadow people. So we can go into depth with shadow people in a big way, but tonight we're just going to be talking mostly about Hatman. So let's just, before we move on, we're not including in any of this so a lot of scientific explanations come down to, the person was feeling heightened emotion because they were on methamphetamines, or they were sleep deprived, or they were full of alcohol, or they were on drugs. We're not talking about that. We're talking about stories where people are just reporting these things. We're not going to put that umbrella of were they on drugs, were they on alcohol. At the end of the day, they're telling their story. Unless they tell me otherwise, I've got no reason to not at least believe that they believe what they saw. So, when did the Hatman start popping up? Well, it's interesting. The 1970s into 1980s, we really saw a surge of this. It has been seen around 1930s, 1940s as well. Some people tie the Hatman as well to Baron Samedi in voodoo beliefs, and we'll talk about gods after, but there could be some sort of a connection there with God belief as well. So in a 4-year period from the late 1970s to early 80s, 18 otherwise healthy young Hmong men who had moved to the US died suddenly in their sleep. Over the next decade, nearly 100 more deaths followed, all with a similar profile. And so you can sort of see where stories like that go to. Doctors gave the condition a name: sudden, unexpected, unexplained nocturnal death syndrome, or SUNS. However, further research conducted in the decades since has concluded that SUNS deaths may have been a different root cause known as Brugada syndrome, a genetic condition so this affects people of Southeast Asian descent, and it can be marked with irregular heartbeats, and there has been some sort of conclusion to this. But there was someone who did a lot of research into this. Shelley Adler wrote a book called Sleep Paralysis, Nightmares, Nocebos, The Mind-Body Connection. And also tied to this as well, you've also got the site called the Hatman Project. So it's a blog, and I want everyone to go and check it out. If you've had a experience, if you have a photo or anything like that, please post it over there on the hatmanproject.com. The link will be in the description below the show here as well. Please get in there, and also to Liminal Earth. I'll have a link to Liminal Earth as well in the show notes, and you can mark down your experiences there on their map. Really, really good work that both these groups are doing. So, people put these stories up on the internet. So, I'm taking it that people are coming out and being open with their stories. So it's a really good thing. So let's have a look at an encounter here. So this person had 4 encounters. Let's start with the first one. I can't remember my age when it happened. Age connected to years, and years is hard for me to pinpoint. But I must have been in between 12 and 14. I was at a friend's house for a sleepover. Before bed, we played hide and seek with her stepdad. I had found the perfect hiding spot behind a pair of long curtains, with my back against the window. I stood there for a while, and out of nowhere I got this weird feeling that I was being watched. Curiosity got me as I turned around, seeing nothing, just a regular backyard. But then it was as if the glowing orbs appeared from nowhere. I saw a shadowy silhouette of a man with a hat and glowing red eyes. I freaked out and gave away my hiding spot. I didn't tell anyone about it, so I was shocked when I heard a week later that another friend of mine had seen him. She told me that she woke up in the middle of the night and that he was standing by her bed. The exact same guy I'd seen, tall, dark, red eyes and a hat. This second encounter, a few years later, I was in my angsty teenage years, the golden days of depression and alienation. It was Halloween and I had a little group of friends to go trick-or-treat with. Halfway through the route, I saw a tall, dark creature following us, hiding behind trees and stalking us. When I turned my back, I think I told my friends about it, but I can't be sure. As I was outside a strange house waiting for candy, I got so sick I vomited. I hadn't eaten any candy, so poisonous candy was off the list, nor had I felt sick earlier that day. My mum picked me up and spent a few days in bed. A third encounter. A few years ago, I was drunk, drank a lot due to past traumas, sober now, but it was late night and I was a bit buzzed. Was about to go to bed, and as I turned off the light to go downstairs, a shadow ran past me. Even as it was dark, I saw the shadow as being a darker shadow than the darkness. I freaked out, stumbled upstairs, tripping over, and then I got so paranoid I couldn't sleep. So I found a package of salt downstairs and made a barrier of salt in front of my bedroom door. And the last encounter. 2 years ago, I was hospitalised in a mental ward, not against my will, but to find our diagnosis. I was sleeping and I had this strange dream where I was part of a team and we were sailing in a small boat. The boat went into a cave and I heard someone say, "He's watching." I woke up and felt that I wasn't alone. I couldn't see anybody or anything, but it was so intense. I ran out of my room and looked for someone to talk to. Not that it helped to have someone tell me it's all in my head. I'm 22 now and still don't know what to think. Is it real or is it in my head? I like to be cautious, so I avoid thinking about him too much and never ever at night. This is a very similar thing with all these stories. It seems like acknowledgement carries a lot of weight in these stories. When people start to stop acknowledging that he's there, it seems that the entity loses strength, loses power. A lot of people have said that things like a salt ring has helped them around their bed, putting a ring of salt around the bed. Again, this could just be creature comforts. This could just be putting your mind at ease so you don't think about the thing. So it's really hard to say whether the salt ring works or for some people it's smudging. So when it comes to smudging, a lot of people use a lot of different techniques. So white sage, juniper, lavender, mugwort, cedar, rosemary, and Palo Santo wood is all they're all good for using to protect yourself from any evil spirits or any dark energy. So a lot of people like doing smudging with this. There's also an interesting thing I've been seeing with some people when they've been reporting what's been happening is leaving presents. So gifting something to the Hatman. Some people I've seen leave a gift of rum or whiskey, and also some people leave a cigar or a cigarette. And this really reminds me of things like leprechauns. When we did our episode and we talked about leprechauns, this really reminded me all about that type of thing and how people will give gifts to the Fae in many European countries. They believe in elves, and they'll give gifts to the elves so that they will have a good harvest, or they'll have good luck, or they'll have a good marriage, or they'll wish upon these things. In Norway and a few other places, they've got the tiny little houses where they build a tiny little house in the side of a hill for the elves to live in. So it's quite interesting how people handle these things, and some people choose to handle them by giving gifts to these entities. Some people I've read about have said that they've found the whiskey to be gone in the morning. I think that's a terrifying thought. Or the cigarette would have been lit and smoked. Again, I'd think that'd be terrifying if I saw that happen, because my first thought would be the physical. Well, who's actually in my house? Is there a real person in my house doing this? Other people say that they wake up and it hasn't been touched, but as long as they leave it out for that night, so they'll wake up, maybe I guess they might drink it and they might smoke it. But just the action of leaving it out overnight, it leads to a better night's sleep for them, leads to them not being affected or not being noticed by the shadow person. And maybe this is a distraction. Maybe the idea is to give them a gift and then they're distracted because they're looking at the gift or something. Other people just think it just sates them. There's a big belief as well out there that these things just are there for shits and giggles. They are literally there just to mess with you, just to get you hyped up so that they'll get a laugh out of it. Tricks to spirits or tricks to gods. We'll go into them. We'll go into the god side after, but yeah, certainly tricks to spirits is one really big thought process on this. So the Japanese have yokai, and yokai are a spirit that can inhabit different things and take on different forms. So you could have a yokai that has taken over your kitchen sink, and that's why you constantly have a bad odor coming from your sink. It could be that constantly your jug is being burnt out and destroyed because there's a yokai in your PowerPoint. Little things like this. This is a belief with amongst people who believe in Shintoism and things like that. So it's very interesting. I have done a big episode about that as well. But in relation to shadow people, I find this quite interesting because we could relate that quite well to this. This is some sort of entity that is trying to get a rise out of you, because when you don't pay attention to them, when you don't notice them, when you don't think about them, they don't tend to have as much power, and they tend to not get as close to the bed as well. A lot of reports say that the more you pay attention to them, the more they'll move to the bed over days, over months, over weeks, or days, weeks, months. So it's quite interesting to think about. So let's have a look as well. This is using the Liminal Earth map. I found a few reports here. So let's go the Hatman, the first cab off the rank. This happened in... This was submitted by Louise, and she's from Green Bay, Hobart, Wisconsin. So this is from 2022. This is May this year. So I'll tell you now, you go on Liminal Earth, you go on the Hatman Project site, you will find more common shadow person and Hatman reports than you will of nearly anything else. They are reported on the daily almost around the world. It's I've been doing a lot of research for things for longer than 3 years, but for the show for 3 years now. And I'll tell you now, sometimes you can run short on sightings here in Australia, especially of things like Yowie or the Black Panther. Like these things that sometimes they just run dry. No one sees anything. Other times, you'll get a few ghosts here and there. But when it comes to shadow people, no matter where I research around the world, I will find information about shadow people that is relevant and current. That's only from like a month ago or a few months ago. So as I said, this is from May. I remember the night was going pretty normally before the event happened. I decided to stay up late and just dance around in my room while listening to music. The only light in my room was coming from the closet, so I thought nothing of the creepy shadows in my room, until a sudden wave of dread came over me. I had never felt this much fear before, especially in my room, which is the place I feel the safest. I instantly pulled out my earbuds and just stood there. I had no clue what was going on, but I was too scared to turn around. I wasn't sure why until I was finally able to turn my head to the side and I saw him, the Hatman. At the time, I had no clue who it was All I saw was a tall figure with a hat standing in the corner of my room. It shook me to my core, and I instantly dashed to my bed, which was on the opposite side of the room from the Hatman. My eyesight was blurred for a few moments as I stared into the corner of my room. During these few moments, the man just stood there. It was almost like he was staring at me, even though I couldn't see any eyes on his face. Then he disappeared, as if he was just missed. I wasn't able to get much sleep that night. The fear was still inside of me. What did I just see? Is he still in the house? Eventually, I was able to go to bed, but I never forgot that first encounter. The next encounters are a bit of a blur, but only because it seemed to be happening more often. I eventually nicknamed him the Shadow Man, and I assumed that I was the only person who saw him. I didn't even tell my therapist about these encounters out of fear that she'd think I was insane. Anyways, I eventually decided to look this up, because convincing myself I was insane definitely wasn't helping my mental health. It turns out that a lot of people actually have seen the Hatman and have experienced the same fear I have. But why have I been seeing him so often? I've started to fear it's some bad omen, like the Hatman is some Grim Reaper-esque telling me I'm going to die soon. I doubt that's the case though, since all I've experienced is just huge feeling of dread whenever I'm in his presence. That doesn't really make all the anxiety disappear though. I feel like I'm going to see him again. Now, I don't expect that Louisa would hear this, but if you do, and for anyone else who's out there who has experienced things like this, try not to tie these things with bad things that happen in your life. I've run into this way too many times. I talked about this in my ghost hunting episode. When I did a 3-part ghost hunting episode. Go back and have a listen to that if you haven't already. But a lot of people, they end up tying themselves to these beliefs, these omens. So every time a bad thing happens, it was because I saw the Shadow Man. I saw the Hatman. So it's because of the Hatman that I'm having all this bad luck. Whereas they were probably going to have that bad luck regardless. It's just that personifying the bad luck makes it stand out more. You know, I had a bad run-in with something, so now I'm going to see bad things all over the place. I mean, it's strange how the human brain works. It's very hard for us to do it the opposite way. It's hard for us to go, you know what, I saw the Hatman, so really good things are going to happen to me. Because we are doing it out of fear. We can't understand what this entity is. We don't know what it does. But I wouldn't let yourselves get tied into it being a bad omen. Honestly, I think that's a really it's a dangerous thing for your own psychological health. Is to let that happen. I think you've got to, especially with this particular entity, it seems like it is try to forget about it. Do something that's going to protect you, that makes you feel like you're protected. Some people wear a cross. As I said, smudging's a thing. The salt circles are a thing. And just try to put it out of your head. Maybe listen to the Oddball Aussie podcast. I've been told by people I can put them to sleep quite easily. But no, seriously, have a listen to something before you go to bed. Try to get your mind off this. Right, and the less you think about the Hatman, I believe the less encounters that you will have, if that's what you're aiming for, if you're not wanting to have encounters with the Hatman. Now, I'm going to go into another story here from Liminal Earth. Now, this one stood out to me because of the plaid shirt involved in this. Now, I'm blanking on the man's name. I still do listen to the podcast Where Did the Road Go? And Sarai had a guest on quite a few times who used to talk about the man with the plaid shirt. And it was just a person they would see in different houses, and it was really interesting because this guest, and I would love to find out who it was, but he would talk about it, and the more he would talk about it on the air, the more he would start to see or hear about other reports. More people would report to his show that they'd seen this red checkered shirt, red plaid shirt. This one's a red and blue plaid shirt, but it's still quite interesting. Not quite the Hatman we described at the start, but still this person describes it as the trucker Hatman. So this is roughly 1990. So, husband and I both saw a man in a trucker hat, red and blue plaid shirt, in the hallway of our home multiple times. He was there and then gone in the blink of an eye. One night, I woke in dream paralysis, and he was standing at the foot of my bed. He made eye contact and began to apologise. He seemed confused. I was finally able to scream and woke in a puddle of sweat and marks on the bed like I had been on fire. When we moved out, I found a packet of photos in the bottom of the built-in china cabinet. The first picture was of a lady who sold us a house. The second picture was the man in the trucker hat and plaid shirt. She had told us her husband died, but mentioned several times he did not die in the house. I put the pictures back where they were, so I have no proof. Really interesting little story there. The idea of spirits being personified, or spirits being seen with clothing on, is not uncommon. It's not rare, but it's certainly an interesting, different version of the Hatman, because same type of thing, standing at the end of the bed watching over someone. So it sparks my interest. It makes me wonder sometimes whether people like the Hatman, or entities, I should say entities like the Hatman, or some spirits, aren't just another person having a out of body experience. Because so many times people tell me that, or read that they'll see a spirit in their bedroom and the spirit seems confused. The Hatman's a little bit different. The Hatman, he doesn't generally seem confused. So to me, that story there, definitely a different take on the Hatman, but I'd say it's more of a spirit-based thing. But I've always thought about that, whether, let's say a person's having a nightmare that they're trapped in another person's house, is that them having an out-of-body experience and being projected into someone else's dream? I mean, how connected is everyone's psyches? It's, you never know. You never know. If you do believe in psychics, or you believe that people can have these experiences, well, maybe this could be something that could happen. Now, another source of information for all of you who want to do some research yourself, do some reading up. If you are on Reddit, I really suggest you look into following r/Hatman. Yeah, this is what I mean by it's so prominent. r/Hatman is a subreddit, and you will find daily reports going up in here. And again, you look at some of the r/Bigfoot or r/aliens, you don't get as many reports as you do these shadow people or the Hatman. And just to have an r/Hatman and still have like daily reports, it's quite interesting. It's quite an interesting dive. I mean, yes, you're going to have people on here that maybe don't actually believe or don't really look into it. They're just putting up trolling stuff. But I generally like to think that a lot of people do believe that they are putting up true stories. So this is one that stood out to me from about a week ago. The Hatman was my friend as a kid. I'm not really sure how to start this. I was a very small child when I started dreaming about him. He appeared to me as a tall skeleton with a purple hat. I don't remember talking to him, but I know that he was a friend. I was a very lonely child who lived on a base in Kentucky. I didn't really have friends and was being abused. As an adult, I've made many friends with someone who had the exact same imagery. We both called him something similar, and we both had similar traumatizing childhoods. I don't think he was just an imaginary friend. My parents sent me away to a psych ward when I was around 5 to 7 because I'd talk about him all the time. I used to draw pictures of him and everything. I don't remember when I stopped seeing him. A part of me wishes I could talk to him again and find out what he really was. And a lot of people have just said that this is the Hatman through and through. A lot of people believe this. And it's an interesting one. Was this a dream protecting a child's trauma? Again, that could be a real thing too. It could all be just in a person's head. Or was this genuinely someone who had made a friend? Now, the thing that stood out to me with this story was the skeleton and the purple top hat. Why that stands out to me is Baron Samedi. Now, Baron Samedi is a patriarchal figure in voodoo beliefs. And Baron Samedi is called a lower. He's one of the lower of Haitian voodoo. He's the lower of the dead, along with the barons of numerous other incarnations: Baron Symmetria, Baron Lacroix, and Baron Criminel. He is the head of the Guidi family of Loa. His brothers are Azagon, Lacroix, and Baron Piquet, and he is the husband of Madame Brigitte. Together, they are the guardians of past, of history, and of heritage. So he's the law of death and fertility. Godlike beings. So he's usually depicted with a top hat, black tall coat, dark glasses, cotton plugs in his nostrils is one thing that people do say they've seen with him, as if to resemble a dressed up corpse. A lot of people say that he looks to be wearing like a skeleton suit, or he is a skeleton by some other reports. And again, this is where it ties in very interesting to me with some people who say they have a really good experience with leaving out rum or tobacco, because Baron Samedi, for instance, loves his tobacco and rum, and a lot of people will leave tobacco and rum out for the Baron Samedi as a gift. Additionally, he is the law of resurrection, and in the latter capacity, he is often called upon for healing by those near or approaching death. It is only the Baron that can accept an individual into the realm of the dead. So also a ferrier of the dead in many ways. Offerings of tobacco generally to curry his favor so that you can go into the realm of the dead, or be healed and not go into the realm of the dead. So again, a very, very interesting connection there, and looks very much like the Hatman. On the promotional picture I designed, the normal Oddball Files picture, you'll see there's a couple of pictures on there that are actually AI adaptations of Hatman, and the connection, the look of this, all I've typed in was Hatman. By the way, Hatman at the end of the bed is all I typed into the AI generator, and what it came out was with exactly the same thing: a tall person at the end of a bed or in a bedroom wearing a long dark jacket and a hat. And this could also be Baron Samedi. I did other AI runs where I put in just Baron Samedi at the end of the bed. Basically the same thing. Maybe the only difference was that the AI put a skeleton face on the Baron Samedi one, but generally pretty much the same picture. So really interesting. Even the AI sort of thinks the same, but I'm guessing that's because of the imagery that's on the internet. But all very interesting stuff. Now we'll wrap this up shortly, but let's just talk about it from the sense of mythology and gods now. So we think about gods, we think about tricksters. Well, we think about gods and the different types of gods there are. So let's think about, in particular, what sort of god this could be. Now, if this was a god that was trying to scare people, we're not thinking a god of war. Like, war is scary and everything, but the needs of a god of war isn't to scare people. It's war. Same, couldn't really be a god of fertility or love because the people aren't reacting that way. Couldn't be a god of nourishment or food or anything like that, or music. So we're narrowing it down to nastier things. So is it a god of death, or is it a god of trickery? Now, I lean more towards the trickster gods because it's very, very rare that we find cases of people dying with and having written about the Hatman before they died. I've been researching this stuff for a long time, and I cannot find many cases where someone's found a journal entry or a blog post or anything. But I mean, I guess that would be a hard thing to find regardless. But what I'm sort of getting at there is I think it's more of a trickster god or trickster spirit. So something that's getting its jollies off by scaring the crap out of you. So we look at people like, we've got the god of the Norse god Loki, obviously. Everyone knows Loki. We've got Eris, the Greek goddess of discord and strife. Now, that's another spin on this, is that we've all gone the Hatman. Well, what if it's a god of what if it's a goddess that's putting on a face, essentially? you've got the Chinese trickster god, the Monkey King, another type of character. Now, why none of these characters really match though? Baron Samedi does, doesn't he? But these characters don't really match. So what could these different gods be? We got people like Wiskadajak. You correct me if I'm wrong with that one, but that's a clever crane of Navajo mythology. Now, these are all animals or people. They don't really match the Hatman in that sense. So what if this is a creation by a god? If gods did exist, if they are real, what if these are manifestations of them, just something they created a long time ago for shits and giggles, and they forgot to pack it away? It's a toy they created and they never put it away. Yeah, you read a lot of mythology from Greeks to Romans to Norse mythology, a lot of European mythology. You read a lot of German mythology, and the gods weren't exactly they weren't exactly nice. So if they left one of their toys out, I could actually see that being a thing. So it's just something to consider. It's one of those angles that we got to look at. We got to look at all different angles when we look at things like this. And the Oddball Files, the point of me making these is for people who are just interested in listening to some cool stories, and also for people who want to get into research and how to research these things. And with things like this, it's always look at it from every angle. Look at it from the physical, the psychological, then look at it from the spiritual, look at it from the paranormal. Spiritual, include the gods in that, include religion in that. There's so many different angles these things can be looked at from. We're never going to have 100% of the answers. Sometimes it turns out to be an easy answer. The person was having a vision or due to being drunk or stoned or something. Other times the person is flat out saying, no, I was completely sober and I still saw this thing and I interacted with it. So we've always got to be open. But to summarize, the Hatman. Tall, 6-7 foot, sometimes seen with red eyes, comes into your bedroom, stands at the end of your bed, causes sleep paralysis in some cases, and gradually gets closer and closer to you the more you allow them into your household. Can be pushed outside. Can be blocked out. Something that we need to consider if you are someone who's having these problems. It could be a psychological. It could help you sleep at least. If that's all it does, then at least you're sleeping. So I hope you all got a bit out of this. I've been a little bit slack on episodes lately, so I'm glad to be getting one out finally. I've had this one in the works for about 3 weeks now, but it's just been about finding time. So I'm hoping this is again going to be me getting back into more regular shows, and the Oddball Files I think is the way to do it. Even though I keep on saying these are going to be short episodes and they always go over 40 minutes, but I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll be back hopefully next week with another Oddball File. And until then, make sure you follow us on Facebook. Send me your emails. If you are anyone who's had stories like this, email me your stories. Always keen for that. theoddballaussie@hotmail.com. Make sure you check out the merch store. All links are in the description below. You can also check out their Twitter, Instagram, message me on there. Let's have a chat on there. I really get on Twitter more than I do anything else. So Twitter and email is normally the best way to get a hold of me. But yeah, I am always up for a chat. And if you want to come on the show, if you're someone who's had an experience and you want to come on the show and talk about your experiences, more than happy to have you on the show as well. So please reach out and we'll make some time. But for now, I am going to head off and start reading about my next little adventure into the rabbit hole, I guess. But until then, look after each other and stay safe out there in the weird. Good night.